Hey guys, I am back with today's video. For today's video, I decided to talk about my labor and delivery story. She is looking right at the camera. She always does that. My labor was induced. I actually went in for my appointment on a Thursday, and that same day they told me that because my blood pressure was up the 2 weeks prior to that appointment, and when I went back the 2 weeks later, it had gone up a little bit. And because my sister had preeclampsia and my family has a history of high blood pressure, I didn't have a history of high blood pressure because I'd never had high blood pressure before. So they diagnosed me with gestational hypertension, which is high blood pressure during pregnancy, and they decided that they were going to induce me. So with that, the situation was a little complicated because my husband's deployed. So then I had to contact him and see if they were going to let him come home. And then along with that, I had to book a flight for him when they did say yes to him coming home. And so he was going to get on his flight to come home that morning. So Saturday, I booked the flight and everything, and he was going to get on his flight for Sunday. So Sunday, he goes to the airport to get on his flight, and it gets delayed a day. Now, I was getting induced that Monday, and he was coming in Monday morning because of the time difference. So then I called my doctor, and I asked her, and I know that was probably, ooh, salud, mama. Ooh. I know that was going to be either yay or nay, but because I had talked to my doctor already and I spoke with her that my husband was deployed and all that stuff, she managed to speak to the staff at the hospital and have them push it back a day. So I was actually induced on a Tuesday, which my husband got there that morning and I had to be there that night. It was crazy. I can imagine if they would have checked my blood pressure then, it would have probably been through the roof. So then we finally get to the hospital. They start me on, they do where they put a pill to open up your cervix. They did that, and then that night when I got to the hospital. And then in the morning, they started the Pitocin, which, what? They started the Pitocin, and that had been going all day. Which the only thing that sucks about being induced is that you're pretty much bedridden because you're strapped to the IV machine. You can move around. That wasn't the issue. The issue was the blood pressure monitor, which was connected to the blood pressure machine. The cuff was connected to a blood pressure machine. And then the heart rate monitor for the baby is connected to the machine next to the blood pressure monitor. So I was pretty much stuck to the bed, and the only time I was able to get out of bed was to I could stand up next to the monitor, but I couldn't go sit on the couch or sit in the rocking chair, which was on the other side of the room. So I was pretty much sitting on the bed, and they brought in a medicine ball for me just so I didn't have to sit on the bed because it was hurting my back. Because I was literally there all day on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, I actually ended up having her, was it Wednesday morning? It was the 21st. I don't remember. Are you looking at my mom? So then I was on the Pitocin that whole Tuesday. And I thought I was going to have her, but because my contractions were really close together when they started the Pitocin. So I'm thinking, all right, they're close together, so, I'm dilating quickly. But I wasn't really dilating all that quickly. My contractions were just really close together, which I didn't feel, surprisingly, because they say when you're induced, you actually feel stronger contractions, and I wasn't feeling them. And at a certain point, midday on Tuesday, they were getting to the point where they were a minute apart. So they had to slow down the Pitocin and because they didn't want to stress her out. So the nurse asked me, she's like, "Are you feeling those?" And then eventually they completely stopped it that day. What? What? I'm talking. I'm talking, Mama. Ow. Here. So then eventually they completely stopped it and then decided to give me a second dose of what was supposed to open up my cervix, or prep my cervix, as they said. So then with that, then I started to dilate a lot better. So then they started up the Pitocin again. So by then I was 3 centimeters, which was really good. That means that everything was going accordingly. So they did the Pitocin for maybe like 3 hours after that. And I felt a pop in my stomach. And so I told Joel, I was like, I think my water just broke. And I was like, so he helped me and asked him to take me to the bathroom because I had to pee as well. So then I went to the bathroom and I thought that the gush of water was going to come. Instead, I just peed. By then, I finally started to feel contractions. That was the first time I actually felt any contractions at all. So I told him to call the nurse and tell her that my water broke. And I sat back down on the bed. And the nurse came back and she was like, all right, was there a gush of water? I said no. She goes, okay, so let's check. So she checked me and she was gonna check me. So she was helping me get to get on the bed. But before she checked me, she wanted to put down like a towel or something on the bed so that I wouldn't get uncomfortable if the gush came. So when she helped me get out of bed, that's when the gush came. And I was like, as she was helping me stand up, I was like, oh, big gush. And then it came. So, because I could feel it coming. And so she was like, all right. And she puts the towel down underneath where I'm going to sit. And I sit down. And that's when she checks me. And she was like, oh, okay, well, you're at 5. Do you want to call the anesthesiologist to go ahead and give you the epidural? So I said yes. They told me it might take a while because of the time of the day. So I was like, yeah.
Well, in the meantime, she calls the lady comes, I'm still at 5 centimeters, and she's like, all right, the next contraction, I'm going to go ahead, let me know so we can go ahead and do everything. So you're not tensed up. So she's putting in the epidural, blah, 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 it's happening, and as soon as she puts in the epidural, I start feeling just before she puts in the epidural, I start actually feeling one contraction, and it's fine. It feels like my normal period cramps. That's what it felt like. So it wasn't unbearable for me, but I was like, I know it's just gonna get worse from here. In my mind, it's just gonna get worse from here. I know it. So I'm like, I'm getting this epidural because I want to be relaxed when I have her, and I don't want it to be too painful. So I'm thinking in my head, it's gonna get more painful. Mind you, I haven't felt any of the contractions throughout the whole thing, and I'm at 5 centimeters. So she puts in the epidural and she's like, are you still feeling these contractions? She goes, it's just supposed to be pressure at this point, but you look like you're still feeling them. I'm like, yeah, I can still feel them. They feel exactly the same. She's like, okay. And she comes back and gives me another dose. And that's supposed to help. Nothing. Still feels exactly the same. She's like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and check you to see where you are. All of this has happened in 5 minutes. She was a very quick anesthesiologist and I didn't feel anything. She was amazing. But I still felt the contractions, and I don't blame her. I know it was just the medication didn't work for me. For some women, it just doesn't work. I happened to have been one of those women. And so she checks me and she's like, well, you're at 8 centimeters, so I'm going to go ahead and call the doctor. I'm like, okay. And she goes out. I guess she calls the doctor, comes back, and she's like, the doctor's at another delivery, but she'll be here as soon as she can. And I go, I feel like I have to push. And she's like, well, whenever you need to push, you go ahead and push. And so she checks and she's like, well, I feel her head, but she's facing up. We need her facing down. So I turn to my side and, you know, roll her over, which that was actually kind of painful when she rolled over. And once the baby rolled over, it was like, okay, it's really time to go. And the nurse had walked out for a second. I guess she keeps going out to make sure that the doctor's on her way. And so she leaves for 3 minutes, maybe. I want to say it was 3 minutes. And I told Joel, I was like, I have to push. Please call the nurse. And he pushes the button and he goes, she's like, hi, how can I help you? And he goes, can you send someone over here? We're ready to push this thing out. Unbelievable. I bust out laughing. I can hear the nurse's station laughing hysterically. My mom is laughing. And then he's like, no big deal. Like stone cold face. Like, what? I was just telling her that we're ready to go. So then I'm like, I have to push. I have to push. I feel all of this. This does not feel like pressure because the epidural did not work for me. So then the doctor finally comes in. They have the prep station done and everything. And the doctor finally comes in. She goes, don't you know you guys aren't supposed to have babies at the same time? And I just laugh. And I'm breathing through the contraction. And she goes, all right, so whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start pushing. So I'm like, all right, I'm ready. And I push. And they're like, oh, here's her head. And she goes, can you give me one more big push? And I'm like, all right. And I push and I take a moment to breathe because I felt like I was completely out of air. So I was like, she's like, breathe through it, push through it, push through it, push through it, go. So I finished pushing and there she was. And she was out in 2 pushes. I'm so proud of myself. And I was so happy that I didn't have to push for longer because that epidural did not work on me. So I couldn't imagine pushing any more times than that with an epidural that didn't work. And then it gets funnier. They give Joel to cut the umbilical cord and he goes and points to my mom. So the nurse and I both bust out laughing, thinking it's hilarious. The doctor thought it was hilarious. So my mom got to cut her umbilical cord, which is amazing for her because she had never been able to be at a delivery. My sister had 2 babies, but she had one was a scheduled cesarean and the other was an emergency cesarean because she had gone into labor. And so she had 2 cesareans and she wasn't able to be there for my niece or nephew's delivery because they only allow 1 person and obviously her husband was going to be there. So she was able to be at my delivery because thank God I delivered naturally and she cut the umbilical cord and my delivery was by far a very memorable delivery in a very special way. So yeah, that was my labor and delivery story. And she was born 5 weeks early, but she was a pretty good weight. She was 5 pounds 13 ounces, I want to say, which means that she probably would have been around 7.5 pounds if I would have gone full term. So yeah, but it was amazing. It was definitely something that I'll never forget. 1, because it was hilarious. 2, because I probably had one of the easier deliveries that I've ever heard of. And I've heard that being induced is painful, and I did not have a painful labor. And I didn't have a painful delivery either. It was, I mean, I felt everything, but I'm pretty sure that it could have been much more painful than it was. That is it for my labor and delivery story. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.